So today I'm going to review The Bright and the Pale by Jessica Rubinkowski. Now, to acknowledge a quick personal bias, Jess and I did for a few years attend the same very tiny school in a very tiny town where you had to walk past the cornfield to get to the school. And I acknowledge the possibility that, I don't know, if I was going to give a book a 9 out of 10, and I just liked the author as a person, that might tie in and make me bump it up that last point or something. But what personal bias will not do is make me think that a bad book is a good book, and I think this is a good book. So that's great, because I was just gonna have to awkwardly not bring the topic up if it turned out I read it and I didn't like it, because I don't think I'd have had the heart to tell her. But I did enjoy it, so it's great. Worked out nicely. To give you an idea, going in, what it's about, 17-year-old Valeria is one of the only survivors of the freeze, a dark magical hold not mountain unleashed on her village. Everyone, including her family, is trapped in an unbreakable sheet of ice. Ever since, she's been on the run from the Tsar, who is determined to imprison anyone who managed to escape. Valeria finds refuge with a thieves' guild, doing odd jobs with her best friend Alec, the only piece of home she has left. That is, until he is brutally murdered. A year later, she discovers Alec is alive and being held against his will. To buy his freedom, she must lead a group of cutthroats and thieves on a perilous expedition to the very mountain that claimed her family. Only something sinister slumbers in the heart of Not, and has waited years for release. Inspired by Russian folklore, Jessica Rubinkowski's epic fantasy debut is a thrilling page-turner with romance, tragedy, magic, and monsters that will stay with you to the very end. This is where I have to admit that I had a vague idea going in what the book was about, but I didn't read the description prior to reading the book, because I kind of forgotten a little bit, oh, maybe that's a good thing, I like to go in blind. But I happened to, kind of do this, and I saw, so let's not mess up the cover. I saw the word not, and for a second I thought that was, the name of the male love interest, and I was like, please tell me you didn't name him Not. And she didn't, thankfully. It's the name of a mountain, which fits much better, obviously. Things I liked. For starters, the cover. I mean, there's the back cover, front cover, beautiful, right? Hard to argue with that. Even the description on the inside. Secondly, I think her description of the setting is just as beautiful as the cover. It's supposed to be a serious review. You know when you're reading a book and the setting actually kind of affects how you're feeling, if it's in a really cold place, you're like, oh, I'm freezing. Or if it's really hot, you're like, ah, it's too warm in this room. Or, I read one book where the whole thing was that the water had gotten turned off in California for a bit in the middle of summer, so I just spent the whole book just being like, I'm so thirsty! And yeah, that was Dry by Neil Shusterman, in case anyone's curious. But, yeah, that's kind of what I got here. And obviously not too extreme in any of those cases. I'm not, a crazy person, but nonetheless, it's very easy to kind of put your mind there and be like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be trudging along out there. Another thing I liked is just how, and this is a weird, oddly specific thing, but it's how often they stop to make camp. I mean, it wasn't focused on a ton. It's not oh, we're gonna spend 5 pages talking about how they're setting up their tent. No, it was brief. It wasn't any longer than it needed to be. But I liked how often it specifically mentioned yeah, they're flippin' tired. They need to eat dinner and go to sleep. Because it frustrates me when I'm reading a book and you're 10 pages, character got their hand chopped off or something, and then for the rest of the book they're just running around nonstop shooting up bad guys. And I'm like, how? You're majorly injured. Shouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. And that wasn't the case in this. I'm like, yeah, people are tired when they're supposed to be tired. That's an odd little nitpicky thing, but I liked that I was never in doubt that the characters were human, and that they need to sleep sometimes, or rest their legs. So I enjoyed that they didn't hike 300 miles in 2 days, and then, blow up a building or something. I don't know, that's not a good example. I did enjoy the characters. Valerie is a bit of a spitfire, but I definitely, well, some people just have that personality in real life. It's not inaccurate for people to be like that in a book. because we've all met someone who was like that too. I think it definitely makes sense given her background. I liked Alec. I appreciated his insecurities, because sometimes I'm reading and I'm just like, come on, you know, the person likes you, or all of these people that are friends, they like you, stop thinking that they hate you. I don't want to read 30 pages of you deciding that everyone in the world hates you, and I didn't get that vibe from him, but the degree to which he had insecurities made sense with what happened in the story, so I'm like, yeah, this is a realistic amount of self-doubt, so I can appreciate that. I'd go through all the rest of the characters, but I'm trying to keep this relatively brief. I will say that the characters that I think you're meant to like, I did like. The characters that I think you're meant to dislike, I definitely disliked. And the characters that you're not really sure how you should feel about them, like, should you even trust them? Yeah, it came through. It's a good job on characterization. What else? There's plenty else. Hey! I thought the pacing was really tight, which I appreciated. That I didn't end up in that position that I end up sometimes reading a book where I get to the middle and it kind of lags for a bit and you deal with it because you're like, well, I'm reasonably invested, I want to know what happens with these characters, I guess I'll slog through these next 50 pages and hope it picks up a bit. Didn't have that feeling, so that's good. Yeah, hi. Pacing, characterization, setting. What haven't I mentioned? I know I mentioned setting, but it's really good. I'll just say that again. It really felt like they're walking through the country in the wintertime toward a mountain, and everything was really well done. I liked that the names of everything were said enough. I know that, again, this is another like oddly specific thing I care about in books, but there's such a thing as saying something too much, to where it's like you never use the pronouns he or she or whatever, you know, and you're just like saying their name like a bajillion times in one paragraph, and you're like, John did this, then John did that, and John did this over here. You know, that gets annoying. But there's also such a thing as like mentioning a character's name back on page 50, and then not getting back to him till like page 300, and you're like, who the F is this guy again? So I like when the author will insert like a single sentence about their previous, like, oh yeah, this was the guy from back then, you're like, oh, okay. Also, like, town names and stuff. I don't like when you mention something once and then not again for 200 pages, and then I don't remember exactly what you're talking about, because I've been to different towns since then, and I don't know what's going on. It's not that you can't figure it out, you can go back and flip through and find it, but it's a little irritating, and this book didn't do that. It said the name of the mountain, and the name of the town, and the name of the country, and the name of the region, and the name of the people a reasonable amount of times. Not so much that it was insulting, but not so little that you're like, wait, what's going on? Where are we? Who are these people? This is where sometimes authors write books as if you're gonna sit down and read it all in one sitting, and you might do that. If you got a day off, or you're like a really fast reader, I'm not. And it's gonna take me 2 days, if I'm doing practically nothing but reading the book, to like a week to read it. On Friday, I'm not gonna remember that town I read about on Monday. So I appreciate that she mentioned it an adequate number of times. I think mood was handled pretty well. Definitely there were some scenes that were a little creepy or stressful that very much meant to be that way. I'm glad that's the case, because I don't like when I'm reading something that's supposed to be a little spooky and I'm just not feeling it, and I didn't get that vibe. It's not horror by any stretch, it's just a proper fantasy novel, but there's got a few of those moments in there, though, that you're like, ooh. In fact, there's a scene. Okay, they're monsters. I'm not going to talk about any of the details about their size, appearance, the numbers of them, the situation in which they're encountered or whatever, but there was another novel I'd started to read that was genuinely about monsters, like in a mine or in a mountain or whatever, and I didn't actually finish it. Maybe it wasn't very good, or maybe I just had other stuff I had to do and I didn't get back to it, unfortunately, but that one literally marketed itself as like a adventure horror novel, and I kind of feel like the monsters got to me a little bit more in this one. So I don't know if that's just saying that Jessica did an amazing job, or that the guy that wrote that one didn't do a very good job, but I appreciated that the monsters in this novel got to me slightly more than the monsters in that horror novel. Like I said though, it's not horror, so don't go in expecting to be constantly creeped out or anything, because if that's what you're expecting, you'll be disappointed, but if you're just expecting just a little bit of creep, yeah, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If there's anything else I could say to potentially convince you it's a reasonably engaging book, is the fact that it showed up in the mail. I had pre-ordered it, and I had coronavirus, and my head felt like it was going to explode. I wasn't able to start reading it for like a day or two after that, because I was too sick, but I was reasonably sick the whole time I read the book. In fact, the saddest part for me was that I couldn't smell the pages because I couldn't smell or taste anything. But the fact that I was able to read the whole thing while sick, I'm like, yeah, it's gotta be a pretty good book if I'm willing to struggle through the extra mental energy of reading something versus just watching something on TV when I, felt like crap. So there's that. And I even had to set it down sometimes for like a day because I'm like, no, I don't have it in me mentally to like understand words on a page, but I really want to get back to it. So it did a pretty good job. I really enjoyed like the last like 100 pages. Like picked up enough that I was just like, okay, well, I'm just not sleeping tonight. I'm just gonna... Not that it was going slow before that, but you know what I mean. When you get to that last little chunk, if they do it well, you're like, I don't want to put the book down. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I come to fantasy for was in that like last 100 pages, big time. Not that it wasn't in there before, but I mean just to a great enough degree within a small enough space that I was like, yeah, I'm all about this. It's the first book in a duology, just so you know that, so you're not thinking it's a standalone. That said, it resolves itself well enough that you could read it and it doesn't end with someone literally dangling off a cliff or something. So there's that. It's a really good book. I'm glad it is, because it would have made me feel really bad if it wasn't. But yeah, check it out if that's your thing.